Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be here.
The NDP government, Green government coalition announcing their new cabinet. You've had a chance to scan it. The Energy and Mines Minister, Michelle Mungle, her only experience in government, she's a former Nelson City councillor. Now she has perhaps one of the most important portfolios in BC if we want to make sure the economy continues to spin along in a positive direction. What do you know about Michelle?
Well, municipal government is a great microcosm of how things work, whether it's provincially or federally. So having that sort of experience under your belt when you go into a job like this is really relevant. You know, having someone like Michelle Mungle in the job, so important. Energy and mines, it's the foundation stone of the BC economy. Without that well managed, we would be in dire straits. And so here's someone from a rural area. The NDP is short of MLAs from rural areas to represent the resource economy within their caucus, within their cabinet. And so she represents someone who brings, I think, a direct connection to the rural economy. The interest that she had in a project I do at Resource Works was evident when I made a presentation to the NDP caucus when they were in opposition in 2014 when we launched. She had a lot of interest in the messages that we were talking about because we're looking for a way to balance the needs of the economy and the environment, do so responsibly so that we could, maintain a healthy province into the future, but also have a prosperous life today. And, I knew at that time that this was someone who understood the nature of this debate, and I have every confidence that around the cabinet table, she has got the basics. So, of course, she's never been a mine and energy minister before, but it's the kind of thing, as you yourself have said, Jim, you haven't done it till you've done it, and now she's doing it.
Yes, most government ministers have to learn on the job. I was saying off air, most agriculture ministers wouldn't know the sharp end of a plow because they're not farmers, but usually the people going into politics, with some exceptions, are pretty sharp folks or they wouldn't be there in the first place. Very competitive business to be in. So you're saying she seemed to be asking the right kind of questions. Is that what you're looking for? Open minds here, don't have some stern, strict policy going in, but rather let's take a look at what's working in BC that's made BC the most productive province in Canada economically.
Yeah, and I think the previous government is one that it didn't stand in the way of industry. It let things happen, and you can debate as to what active measures they took that had an effect on the economy. You could debate that till the cows come home. But when you can say of a government that it didn't stand in the way of success, that's a thing that's not easy for governments to do. There's an inclination to get involved in the details, to pick winners. So if this government is able to maybe hold back on that impulse to help with the success of others, maybe stand back, take a leaf from how things have worked successfully in BC, but also deliver, of course, on the things that they feel they have promised to voters, because that's a pact that they have with the electorate, that, anyone in government that will want to deliver the mandate. So finding a balance there. Also, of course, not forgetting that when you become a minister, you suddenly have all these advisors around you who are experts in their fields. They are neutral civil servants doing their jobs, giving you the information, and then it's left to the minister and to cabinet to make political decisions that come back to that mandate they believe they have from the people. So, just letting those experts advise you, but still knowing that you have to make that political decision at the right time is, I believe, the essence of success in a job like that.
Were there any policy announcements during the election campaign that made you very nervous from the NDP?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of people in investment, in banking industry, economists, people who own companies who are looking at a few issues for valid reasons, I think. And this is not in any way a political statement. You know, I think Site C is a big issue. There's probably $8 billion or more in investment. It's creating thousands of businesses, small businesses, some large businesses. It's creating over 2,000 jobs. It's part of the future of cleaner energy supply in Canada, and we know we're going to need more clean electricity. It's just a fact as we look to meet the obligations of the Paris Agreement on climate. We've got to have that clean energy, and Site C will produce it. So when we hear talk that it could be killed for reasons that I think the NDP has put together its case, but I don't think everyone has bought into that, because it would be very expensive to kill that project. It would cause a lot of disruption for workers, for different companies, and also for our long-term clean energy supply. So that's one thing. Another one is also a major infrastructure project, the Kinder Morgan or Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline project, which is almost the same scale of investment, one of the biggest investments we've ever seen in BC, and it seems as if that one could be at risk, depending on how the federal government maybe reacts to some of the vows that the NDP with their Green partners have made.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
I'm Brian Fowler, President of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineer gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, is the Green Party really the mysterious monkey running around in the room with maybe a hammer, maybe a shotgun, maybe with a pillowcase stuffed with coins? We don't know what kind of influence they're going to have on the NDP government. Is that one of the factors that makes people who have invested in the resource industry very nervous?
I think there is some apprehension. The supply agreement, the contract between the BC Green NDP, which is the thing that has allowed the NDP to form government, is intended clearly to manage that relationship, manage the expectations there, so that the Greens understand what they get from the transaction, and the NDP has a sort of security or calmness that it can derive from the agreement that will allow it to, in a predictable way, go about its business and maybe use it to radiate from the center of power to the investment community that they are sure that they can provide stability in this mix. I think that's kind of the investment intention behind such an agreement, and it's probably going to be tested. Who knows how exactly? Maybe in the legislature, maybe in unpredictable occurrences that might arise. And I think there's other indications that they're seeking in the NDP to have an appearance of stability, confidence, and a positive dedication to economic stability in the province. One of those is the selection for the head of the civil service, who's an individual with a lot of background in the forestry and higher education, skills training in the trades, a very solid background. And I think that's also being taken already by industry, certainly some companies I've talked to, as a signal that They're serious about jobs. They're serious about taking a positive approach to resource economy, despite the contradictions that you see if they are talking about canceling or trying to cancel some big investment projects.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Stewart Muir. Stewart, of course, one of the things here, we have a big urban versus rural split here. The NDP picking up most of their seats in urban areas. The Liberals in rural areas. The people in the rural areas, of course, work in the natural resource industry. What do they have to point out to make the people in the big cities understand that a healthy resource industry is a healthy urban environment?
Well, that's a really important point, and I'm glad you raised it, Jim, because one of the things to keep in mind is that we do hear a lot of rhetoric, especially in Vancouver and Victoria, that the resource industry in BC is a thing of the past or on its way out. And the fact is, when you look at the data, we can see that our resource industries are steadier than most other industries. They're growing when other industries aren't growing. It's a diversified resource sector, which protects us against the boom-bust cycle that we see in housing. And right now, there's surely a bust coming up, or at least a decline coming up in housing, simply because of the fact that money is going to be more expensive as interest rates go up. So having the stable base of a diversified, and by diversified, I mean forestry and different kinds of forestry, mining, different kinds of mining, oil and gas, so different kinds of petroleum, got all these different resource sectors that come up and go down at different time scales. That provides a base stability to the province, so we don't have that boom and bust risk that the housing market tends to give us. And so, it's not really about politics when you say that probably 77%, almost 80% of the things we export from BC are resource-based. So definitely resources are not a thing of the past. They are a thing of the future.
You've met with the new forestry minister. What can you tell us about Doug Donaldson?
Doug Donaldson, who's from the northwest of the province, and in fact, all of us, Jim, we have something in common in journalism. Doug's got a background in journalism. He's worked at a paper I worked at the Vancouver Sun. He has been an instructor of journalism. I had a great conversation with him over breakfast almost a year ago at the BC Geoscience event that was held in Victoria, and got to know him quite well. I think they've got someone who used to work in the forest industry as well as being a natural communicator. He understands the issues. I think also his background as energy critic for the NDP in opposition will serve him well in understanding the issues and resources. So I'm looking forward to meeting him now in his role as the Minister of Forests and Associated Areas, because with wildfires, with the softwood conflict, with log exports, with the need to invest in mills and build up the employment base in forestry, there's so many issues there that are central to prosperity.
Well, Vancouver is still considered the world capital when it comes to investment and running small mining operations and developing exploration. So we know that's a factor for the city, but can you give any other examples about how the resource industry is working in downtown Vancouver?
Yeah, and I often hear in Vancouver that the future of the city is about tech, high tech, and different things like tourism. And I think there's definitely some exciting stories there. I mean, of course, there's so much going on. A lot of it is connected, especially in high tech, with the resource sector. And I think that's something that is often overlooked. For example, I have a friend who has a company. It's based in Chinatown. One of the projects they do is write and support the software to do maintenance, the routine maintenance on those gigantic trucks they use up in the Alberta sands in Alberta. You've seen those trucks or pictures of them. They're the size of your house. They're the behemoths. And so they run that program out of Chinatown. They're right near Granville Island. There's a little company. I've been on a tour through it. They do the crews and services for medical services at remote logging, mining, energy camps. So you go out there, they've got hundreds or maybe thousands of workers out in some remote location. Those people, they have accidents, they fall ill, they need a Band-Aid or more, and they need to get that from somewhere. Here's a company that actually provides stages, all of the people, the talent, the resources to be able to provide that. And yet steps away, there's people sipping on their lattes down at beautiful Granville Island. So you don't even, think of those on a day-to-day basis, but a lot of people in Metro Vancouver and elsewhere make a living in such areas.
Also, too, do you think that perhaps the NDP might have learned from past lessons where I call it the eat the rich attitude is very negative for business? The last time the NDP ran the province, 50,000 people left, when normally every year about 50,000 people move into the greater Vancouver area. Do you think lessons of the past have been learned and it'll be different this time?
Well, I think there's, a bright side there for sure in the fact that in the 90s, the era you're referring to, there was a lot of support from the BC government for forestry. I think the War in the Woods era was on the NDP's watch. Last time they were in government, they stood up for the jobs in forestry, the exports and social benefits that come from doing that the right way. And they were constantly at loggerheads with organizations that wanted to stop BC from having this. There's been a lot of change since then. I would say the industry has gotten better, fitter, more efficient. It's smaller. If you look also at the natural gas industry, a lot of the regulations to do natural gas that we have today in BC were originated, again, on the NDP's watch. So that's a very strong consideration. Also a proof point for the hope for dedication of this government to ensure that those jobs in those rural communities, even if they're not heavily represented in the caucus, do have recognition when it comes to making decisions about the economy, because it really is so important. All the data is neutral data. It's accessible for anyone. You can see it through Stats Canada. I've got a lot of it on my website at resourceworks.com. It's just the facts, and the facts say we've got to have a strong resource base in this province.
Stewart, you've been to international conferences concerning resource development and mining. How do they look at BC's current regulatory regime, and do they want to copy it?
Well, people want to copy the best of it because, for example, our oil and gas regulations, which, as I mentioned, were developed in the 90s, a lot of them are seen widely internationally as being best in class. I recently met with a gentleman from Kazakhstan who was a government official who was coming here to meet with oil and gas commission people to learn what it is we do right, so he could take that back and suggest it for the Kazakhstan oil and gas industry, which is a growing and important part of their economy. We have global recognition also in mining. The conference I went to recently in India, we've talked about it. I was asked so many questions about why is it that Canada has got so much information about its mining resources? Why do you have these regulations that have made Canada, probably with Australia, one of two nations that leads the world in the mining industry? If there isn't enough recognition of mining in our economy, I think there should be, because it is something that we stand out for internationally, and the whole rest of the world recognizes our provenance there. So if we can just embrace that and accept it as something we're good at and want to get better at in future as well, then I think it could be, a crucial part of developing the mining sector, because we need it, not just for consumer goods, but also for the clean energy, clean tech revolution that's already happening under our feet.
Stewart, is there an overall message you'd like to give the new government as it rolls up its sleeves and starts working?
Well, I think finding the balance, not going too far one way or the other, seeking to bridge the divides. The rural-urban one is real. It's there. I think it's been a challenge under the past government. It never goes away. I think it does get worse over time. And yet the dependencies are so important. So there are some ways to approach it. There's information that is needed. I think again this is something that really just cuts across politics. It comes down to the economy. It comes down to economic literacy. People are so busy in their daily lives chasing their kids around, working their job or their 2 jobs or their 3 jobs to pay these big mortgages a lot of people carry. They're not necessarily thinking about these higher issues. They're content to leave it to government. So it's important that government takes as its role to provide good information, to heal these divides between the rural and urban places, to make sure that we recognize these linkages and dependencies. When we want to have natural gas delivered to our house, we have to recognize that it has to be produced somewhere. Well, when we want to have that new iPhone, I think it's worth at least pausing for a moment to consider that there's something like 35 different mineral elements required that have to be mined somewhere, so that if you want to go out to, protest a pipeline or just go to work in your car using your iPhone doing either activity, you're dependent on a global natural resource sector that has to be done responsibly if we're to do it at all.
Stewart, any plans or hopes of having maybe key players from the resource industries meet up with the certain ministers who would look after them?
Well, I think anyone who's got issues, who represents a company or an industry is thinking about that. There's a pretty long list of issues. Some of them are general that apply to every company in a sector. I think the carbon tax is a good example. How that's implemented. Is it done wisely, fairly? Is it done in a way that creates the intended result and is also fair and doesn't cause industries to suddenly decide to go to the U.S. where they don't have a carbon tax, where maybe the costs are lower? I mean, we're potentially at risk if we push taxes up too high in some areas. So we've got to make sure that it's done with care. So those are big general issues. And then when it comes to specific issues, maybe it's a mine. Recently there was a mining proposal in Kamloops, the Ajax mine, that I think has encountered some friction. We've got the city council saying it's against it, even though they've negotiated a $4 million a year package of benefits from the mine if it goes ahead. These are interesting times, full of contradiction, and it's the wise political leader who is able to bring together parties that don't see eye to eye and find those compromises so that we can get the net benefit at the end of the day. That's a real skill, and let's hope that they've got it in this cabinet group. I've got definitely an optimistic feeling that the experience around that table is one that makes that a real possibility, if not a likelihood.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.